Welcome to the Explore the Circular Economy show by the MacArthur Foundation, where we talk and discuss about how to move away from a linear take-make-waste economy to one that designs out waste and pollution, keeps products and materials in use, and regenerates natural systems. My name is Laura. I am part of the learning team here at the Foundation, and I will be your host for the next 30 minutes. Now, last week, we were talking a lot about how a circular economy for water would look like, and we showcased some innovations happening all around the world about how we can fix some of the water challenges of the industry today. And one of the things we explored with our speakers was the link between climate change and water. And today, we're going to explore further how the circular economy can help us tackle climate change and how it provides a solid and strong solution for economic recovery during and after the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, and to help us get started, I've asked several of my work colleagues to be here in the studio with me and to join me for a short quiz in which we're going to be exploring some of these examples of how the circular economy provides a solution for economic recovery. And we're going to be focusing on three main sectors: products, mobility, and food. So welcome, Rob Holmes and Chiara Caggiu. It's a pleasure to have you here, and thank you for taking this challenge. Also, next to me, I have a very familiar face for you at home, probably, Seb Egerton-Reid, our Learning Programs Lead at the MacArthur Foundation, who is going to be helping us and giving some insights about some of the questions that we're going to be exploring.
I'm just here to provide wisdom.
Of course. And just to say, as a reminder, that all the findings and results that we're going to be exploring here can be found on a new series of insight papers that we've published this summer around 10 circular investment opportunities and 4 key roles for policymakers. So without further ado, let's get started. Are you ready?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Welcome to the Explore the Circular Economy show, the quiz. First question, Rob, this one goes to you, around mobility. Multimodal mobility systems could reduce household costs by blank within Europe by 2050 and reduce global CO2 emissions by blank in 2040. Actually, Seb, maybe before we get started, I think maybe some of our audience at home is wondering, what are multimodal mobility systems?
This is what I'm here for. So multimodal mobility system refers to this idea of an integrated, connected system of mobility that exists within cities. So how do we link up between different forms of transport, cars, buses, trains, bikes? How does that all work as one system?
Okay, well, let's see what are the possible options.
You, Rob? It might give you a clue to the answer.
So we have A, 50-70, B, 65-80, or C, 70-70.
I think I'm going to go for C.
C, 70-70.
Yes.
And that answer is correct.
He said that Rob played this game on an earlier episode of this show, and he went for C every single time and won comfortably using that strategy. So we'll see if that's going to work again, Rob. I'm not sure if Laura's throwing any curveballs in there for you.
Let me tell you, Rob, I knew that.
And they arrived at this number by looking at certain trends in mobility and the benefits of those. So sharing economy, for example, in cities. What happens if we think about how we move people around cities versus cars, electrification, better integrated mobility systems, the multimodal element. All of this is, of course, detailed in the COVID-19 papers on the Foundation's website if you really want to dive in deep into it.
Which will be shared on our chat box.
Fantastic.
Second question, Chiara, this one is for you. Remanufactured car parts with good as new warranty are blank lower in terms of price compared to new replacement parts. So this is an example that will showcase the importance of remanufacture in the technical cycle of the circular economy. We have option A, 30 to 50%, option B, 20 to 30, and option C, 15 to 20.
Yes, so I think remanufacturing is an important part of circular economy. So I would say A, between 30 and 50%.
Are you sure?
Yes, let's try.
And the answer is correct. Remanufactured car parts with good as new warranty are 30 to 50% lower in terms of price compared to new replacement parts. Anything you would like to add to this?
Remanufacturing, obviously, one of those inner loops on the foundation's butterfly diagram. Higher value because it retains energy and labour costs compared to, say, recycling or making new parts. And that cost reduction is just one of the benefits. There's also huge benefits in terms of energy savings and water savings and environmental benefits as well.
Rob, you're ready for question 3. This one will focus on products.
Could mix it all up.
Go for option C. And this is around plastic packaging. So the question is, replacing just 20% of single-use plastic packaging with reusable alternatives globally offers an economic opportunity worth at least blank billion, while saving about 6 million tons of material. So in this one, we're really focusing on the economic opportunity, although you can also see by this statement that it has a huge environmental impact. So option A, 5 billion, B, 10 billion, and C, 15 billion.
For this one, I'm going to go for B, please, Lara.
B.
Yes.
That answer is correct. I thought I was choosing very challenging questions. Maybe it will get harder as we go through this.
He's on the ball, isn't he? But I think the reason that we're flagging up some of these data points that come out of these papers is because what those papers kind of explore is, as these kind of investment packages are being put together in a sort of economic recovery, how do we, reverse the contraction and continue to grow our economy? What are we going to choose to invest in? And this question, and actually the next question, sort of hint at things that are already showing extremely promising economic signs that may be preferable to invest in versus doing a lot more of what already exists. And reuse in the plastic packaging space is one example of that.
Exactly. But there are many examples in different sectors, which brings me to question number 4, Chiara, which is around fashion, something that I know you're quite familiar with. So the second-hand market is projected to reach nearly twice the size of fast fashion by 2029. This is a huge statement because we know how fast fashion has grown over the past decades, with resale models expected to drive the increased growth projected at blank in the next 5 years. A, 295%, B, 380%, or C, 414%.
I would say A, 295.
Well, actually, the impact is even greater than that, because the answer is it's C, 414% in the next 5 years. And I think this shows like the amazing changes that we're seeing in the fashion industry, not only in the fashion industry, in relation to how we use our clothes, how we feel about our clothes, and the materials and everything that we use every single day. Now, we're going to move on to food. Rob. A recent report by the World Economic Forum indicated that by 2030, blank number of jobs and blank US dollars in economic opportunities could be created by reforming food, land, and ocean use by, among other things, making greater use of regenerative agricultural practices. Option A, 191 million and 3.56 trillion. Option B, 91 million and 4.16 trillion. And option C, 91 million, 2.95 trillion.
It should be said that regenerative agricultural practices is kind of a catch-all phrase for a number of practices that really focus on how do we rebuild the health of our soils, how do we enhance ecosystems in the way in which we grow our food versus heavy use of pesticides, heavy use of fertilizers. There are some projections that we've only got 60 harvests of soil left if we don't start investing in that very crucial resource in our farming sector.
Did that help you, Rob?
I don't think it helps with this question specifically.
With 91 million and 2.95 trillion, I think we'll go for C again. The old
foresee
trusty.
again? Would that strategy work? Nope.
No.
Actually, solution is A, 191 million jobs and 3.56 trillion US dollars in economic opportunity. So now I think all of you have the same, both of you have the same. So Chiara,
Yes.
it's your turn. Last question regarding food as well. Blank in environmental costs caused by the current system could be avoided by increasing the collection, redistribution, and valorization of food surplus and inedible byproducts. 5 billion, 550 billion, or 700 billion.
You could really cut the tension with a knife, couldn't you?
I would say B, 550.
The answer is C.
Wow.
Even bigger than you think. So 700 billion US dollars could be saved in environmental costs.
And part of that is looking at if 30% of food is wasted, which is the statistic, all the things that go into the energy, the food, the materials, and all the things that come out, all the sort of externalities attached to that in terms of carbon emissions. Huge amount that goes into making that food then is just turned into waste, or just becomes waste and ends up in landfills or other places. That's a big part of the chunk that informs that 700 billion in environmental costs.
Absolutely. And well, thank you, Chiara. Thank you, Rob.
Rob is undefeated in this particular
game that we've played. Well, he has probably
Next
learned not to
challenger.
use that strategy ever again, about only choosing one option. But just as a reminder for you at home, that we have shared in the chat box now the link to all these insight papers where you can find more information and more findings and more results about how the circular economy provides an opportunity for investment and for policymakers as well in cities. Now, a few days ago, we had the chance to talk to Nigel Topping, which is the UK's government for COP2060 high-level climate action champion. And we were talking about him about a few things. How can we meet the Paris Agreement targets, and how we can bring each sector, whether it's aluminium, steel, food, on the right pathway to get to a zero carbon economy. My colleague, Josh, executive lead of the institution's governments and cities team, was in conversations with him. Let's hear them.
Hello and welcome. Today we're going to discuss circular economy and climate, and with me is Nigel Topping, the UK's high-level champion for climate action. Nigel, thanks very much for joining us. Maybe we can start by trying to elucidate what a high-level champion for climate action actually is.
Well, thanks. It's lovely to join you. The role of high-level climate action champion was created in Paris by the parties to the United Nations Climate Convention. Because in Paris, as well as creating the Paris Agreement, which says what nation states have to do, submit a plan and ratchet it every 5 years with the view to the 1.5 degree target, they also recognise that it's going to be impossible to get to those net zero targets without what they call non-state actors, businesses, investors, cities, regions, universities, citizens. So the role of a high-level climate action champion is to work with everyone who's not a nation state, who's a party to the convention, to mobilise, to drive up ambition, to accelerate action, and then to use that momentum to help countries go faster, what we call the ambition loop. So the faster that businesses and cities go, the easier it is for governments to have bold policy. And of course, as governments lift the floor, then everyone else can go faster. So we go faster and faster towards zero.
So non-state actors, of which the Ellen MacArthur Foundation is one, and we recently joined the Marrakesh Partnership, which is the vehicle that helps bring those views to the table. Have you seen recently, and in the run-up to COP26, an increased importance given to circular economy solutions as a powerful contribution to climate change mitigation?
First of all, thank you for joining the Marrakesh Partnership. It was named after the COP after Paris, which was held in Morocco. And as you say, it's the global coalition of organisations working towards zero. So it's great to have Ellen MacArthur Foundation in there. And I would say that in the 5 years since Paris, we've seen an absolute sea change in awareness of the centrality of the circular economy to getting to the zero carbon economy. And your work at the foundation has been absolutely central to that. I think there's been a sort of gradual maturity of really focusing on energy, so a big focus on renewables, and gradually realizing that the economics are with us, not against us, as costs keep coming down. Then turning to transport, we see so much more about electrification of transport. But in the last few years, amongst those really focusing on climate, there's been a real awakening of the centrality of the material economy, not just the energy economy. And within that, a realization that we can't get to zero carbon materials without circularizing the materials bit of our economy. But I know the research you've done says maybe over 50%. No one's arguing that it's somewhere between 40 and 60% of the puzzle when it comes to cement, steel, plastics, etc. is circularity. So that's very different from 5 years ago, I think.
And we also see a lot of policy making around this topic, and of course policy makers can give visibility for investors, which is absolutely key. This is why the interface between the private and the public sector is so important, which brings me to have a look at the national side of things. And countries are putting national roadmaps on the table. One of them is Chile, and you work alongside Gonzalo Munoz, who was the COP25 high-level champion, who's from Chile. And I know that you're very keen to bring the global south to the discussion. So what's your plan in order to give those countries more visibility at COP26?
First of all, he's still the COP25 champion. The role runs for 2 COPs, so Gonzalo and I are working together. And he's a real champion of obviously the B Corp movement and the circularity in his work. So we're trying to do a couple of things. The first is trying to bring more Global South partners into the Marrakesh Partnership. So that's an open invitation to civil society organisations working with businesses, investors, cities from the Global South to get in touch and get involved. So we're reaching out. We're engaging a lot more. I had a dialogue with a group of Southeast Asian partners just a couple of weeks ago. Gonzalo, of course, has a very good network certainly in Latin America, and we're bringing more of those in. And we're actively working now in Africa and Southeast Asia to both engage more virtually now, but also to bring more partners into the Marrakesh Partnership. And in particular, we're focusing on Africa because, as you know, this is an annual cycle that the multilateral system goes through. I mean, Paris and Glasgow are like high points because of this 5-year cycle, but the next COP after Glasgow will be in Africa. So we're particularly keen, given the role of Africa as presidency of COP27. I will then work with an African climate action champion. We're particularly keen to build those relationships. And we're also, we've launched a big initiative on mitigation, but we're going to be launching a big campaign on resilience, which is relevant to everybody, but particularly relevant to the most vulnerable countries, the majority of whom are in the Global South, of course.
And at company level, companies do have climate ambitions that they published. They also, for a growing part of them, have circular economy strategies, and they don't necessarily make the link between the two. And actually, it would be helpful for them to understand to what extent their circular economy strategy also helps achieve their climate ambitions. Is there a way that a mechanism could be designed in order to help them make that link, therefore also taking more of them on board because they're already doing things that are conducive to their objectives in a way?
Yeah, I think that's happening naturally. I mean, a lot of what me and Gonzalo are focused on is publishing a series of net zero pathways for every sector, which kind of lay out the best thinking of the MacArthur Foundation and all the partners in the Marrakesh Partnership around how do we get to zero in steel, in cement, etc. So of course, where relevant, there's a big, so in those 2 sectors, for example, there's a big arrow saying, apply circularity here. So I think we're in a convergence phase. I think sometimes in the past, the circular economy has been talked about as though it was the solution to everything, and climate has been talked about as though it didn't connect with circular economy. So both of those narratives, I think, have been have needed to come together to demonstrate that you don't get to zero without circularity, and that circularity isn't the whole solution. It's big contributor to the solution. So I think through the pathways, which we're pointing everybody to, and they'll be published in October, November. And then, of course, we're working very hard to get every company in the world to commit to zero before 2050 through this Race to Zero initiative, which Gonzalo and I launched, which already has about 1,000 companies and 500 cities and universities and investors. I think about a third of the world's population, $5 trillion of assets already in, and a lot more coming between now and the Paris anniversary. So hopefully those numbers will all significantly increase by then.
And a final question, Nigel. As you look forward to COP26 just over a year from now, what outcome would satisfy you or would make you feel that the job has been done well?
Well, for me, my main focus is on getting to COP with a very clear sense that in the majority of sectors in the global economy, so across transport, materials, power, the built environment, and food and agriculture, we have achieved what you might think of as a breakthrough point when more than 20% of the main actors are committed to and on track to the zero carbon economy before 2050. I mean, it's an inexact science, but we know that roughly once you get 20% of the system on track, you're on the exponential part of the S curve, and everybody tends to follow. And that's, I think, one of the things we're really trying to do now is tell that story of exponential change, because we know that's the way that every single industrial disruption that's ever happened has gone through an S curve. So a lot of every time I hear a narrative which is linear, which is, oh, we're only at 4% EV penetration, for example, I get overexcited and jump up and down and say, yes, but we were at 2% 18 months ago. So if we're doubling every 18 months, we go 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, boom, it's game over within this decade. And we're starting to see those exponentials kick in across all the major sectors. So my biggest desire for COP26 in Glasgow was that the nations of the world and the investors of the world and the CEOs of the world and the citizens of the world all see that transition has become inevitable and decide to get on board, so that by the time we get to 2030, we have halved emissions. We're well on the way to implementing the circular economy and to creating a world which is much better for the generations to come.
Well, we're certainly very much looking forward to working with you and your team on that journey. Nigel Topping, thanks very much for joining us today.
That was Nigel Topping, the UK's COP26 high-level climate action champion, which, by the way, the COP26 is due to happen in Glasgow in November 2021. Now, I am still joined by Seb here in the studio. Both Seb and I work in the learning team here at the Foundation, and one of the things that we do is teach and get people excited about the concept of a circular economy, hopefully.
You're now balancing a lot of things on your lap, Clara. I hope you can handle this for the next, when we get to the end of this show.
I don't know, let's see. But basically, because we do this, we get a lot of questions every single time we explain the concept. And so what we've done is we've tried to put some of them in this jar, in this glass container, and we are going to hopefully answer as many as possible.
Your question, and I say your question, I mean you, the viewer, may be about to get answered.
Maybe. And if we don't, then just put it in the chat, please. So Seb, what role does consumer behavior play in the circular economy model?
So many people focus on consumer behavior as a kind of key driver of change. The challenge there is that most of the changes that we as consumers can actually make tend to be very much end of pipe, because most waste or most challenges that we face in our economy are really decided at the design stage of whatever product or service we're using. So consumers, the actions consumers can take, whether that's purchasing decisions or even if it's recycling more or cleaning up beaches, tend to be limited in terms of effect, focused on the end of pipe, which doesn't mean they're not valuable or they're not good things to do. But we at the Foundation have focused the circular economy very much on how do we drive that system level change starting the design phase. And I think it links a little bit to what Nigel Topping was saying. How do we get to that kind of exponential moment where sectors and everything is kind of working together? Because, and how do we give consumers just good choices?
And I guess also it is quite easy to just blame the consumers as individuals for all the problems that we're facing instead of understanding the underlying system that is the one currently encouraging all this or making them even bigger.
You can feel a bit sorry for consumers sometimes, can't you, when you hear some of the meta-narratives that we have in our society, almost it's your fault, you're not recycling enough. But the question is never asked, but what was the intention of that product or that thing when it was designed in the first place, and what can you actually do? So I agree. We're almost a bit harsh on consumers in the way we talk about it. Let's design things right at the beginning, so they're designed deliberately to be valorized and utilized for as long as possible, and then after their initial life.
So after all, we are all consumers. So for the people watching us at home, what would you recommend?
I would say, actually, are we all consumers? Because we don't really consume our products, do we? I don't consume this jumper. Maybe we consume food. We're really users, and that's kind of the mindset of the circular economy, this sort of transition from thinking about ourselves as users of things, because that's what's actually happening. And the problem when you think about yourself as a consumer is that if you haven't consumed the shirts, what happens to it after you've finished? Well, if you're a user, there's an implication that there has to be some plan for how that material is reutilised. But there are things that our customers can do, and we were looking earlier at some of the examples of sectors of reuse and plastic packaging and resale and fashion, where there are some interesting choices you can make already and some interesting business propositions that are having an impact and are growing.
Okay, Seb, I think it's time to move to a second question.
The drama of this is palpable in the studio. I hope it's coming across on the cameras.
Does the circular economy contribute to economic growth?
It's a good question. I guess it's partly what we were discussing through, and if you dive into those COVID-19 papers, it's a strong theme there. There's lots of reports and data and research that shows circular economy delivers growth that benefits business, society, and environment. And of course, there's a whole host of kind of nuance to that question, like what are you focused on growing? Maybe circular economy doesn't speak to necessarily always to the kind of quarter by quarter sales growth that drives many businesses today, because it tends to be a model where you invest and then you deliver value over a much longer period of time. GDP is a very common measure of growth that is criticised from a whole various range of angles. But as we kind of face these questions of what do we invest in and how do we grow our economies after the contraction kind of caused by the sort of the pandemic that we've been living through, the circular economy is a very interesting proposition for kind of better growth. What kinds of economic activities are we trying to drive, and what kind of growth do we want?
And GDP, for people who might not know what this means, is the gross domestic product, which is the added market value of all the products and services, produced in a country in 1 year. And
spoken like a true economist, Lara.
Well, I hope my professors would be proud of me. But coming back to something you've just said.
And just on GDP, the founder of GDP quite explicitly said, it's a really useful measure, but not if you're trying to compare between countries. And I guess we all know how that's turned out.
Exactly. And it's very limiting in terms of an indicator. And that's why we need to redefine the goal that we're using, and even redefine what economic growth is and how we measure it. Because basically, if that's going to be the major indicator that we are achieving, and in a way, comparing countries with, it has to be about something else. It has to be about building a better planet and a better life for everyone, which is not something that GDP currently accounts for. I think we have time for one more question, Seb.
Look at all those unanswered questions in the jar. It's almost like we're going to have to do this again in another future show. We'll have to find 10 minutes at the end to do some FAQs.
I think we will need to do more than one episode, Seb. And this one is a very common one that we get all the time, and it's how does sustainability relate to the circular economy?
Yeah, so sustainability is a very broad term. It's used to talk about a lot of different things, and there are a lot of great actions that have been taken under the banner of sustainability. But equally, what we define, the circular economy, sustainability talks more about, for me always talks more about an outcome. Of course we want to sustain whatever we're doing. Circular economy is a clear vision and goal and a clear alternative to the existing system, and speaks about the system versus, very often what we attach to sustainability is this kind of consumer behavior change, individual actions, guilt, sometimes guilt for organizations and companies and individuals. Michael Braungart has this kind of famous story that I always like to, well, he told this in a TEDx talk, so it's available for anyone to see, but he always says, well, if you asked how your relationship was going and you said sustainable, you would say, oh dear, I'm so sorry to hear that, because really we're trying to achieve more good and not just less bad. And we need to do that by looking at the whole system, and we need a clear vision of where we're trying to get to, and that's what the circular economy kind of answers. So we define the circular economy as quite distinct from sustainability.
Does that mean that, for example, for companies, we know it's quite common that companies have sustainability departments. How would we go about this with the circular economy? Would you create a circular economy department in each company?
Very often, the circular economy is driven in the sustainability department in companies, because those departments often look out across the organization. Companies do it in different ways. So some companies have kind of circular economy leads or circular economy leads for strategies. What we're most interested in, I think, is the idea of a circular economy becoming pervasive at every level of an organization, starting actually at the top. So the thinking, the approach, the principles and the mindset to be embedded across an organization, versus this notion that it kind of becomes another department. In some ways, that's the challenge with sustainability departments, is they often sit in their individual box. Circular economy needs to be embedded in your strategy, in your core strategy as an organization.
Absolutely. And thank you, Seb. Unfortunately, we're running out of time, although we had about 15 more questions here, but we will get to them in future episodes, I'm completely sure. And thank you for watching us at home. Maybe we've answered some of your questions, and maybe you still are wondering what the circular economy means in a lot of different contexts, for many different industries and for many different players. But please leave them on the chat box, and we will try to answer them in future episodes of this season. You can also continue the conversation on our LinkedIn communities, and hopefully we can get more and more of these questions answered there. Next week, we're going to be talking about what will it take to transform the economy. And we're going to be joined in the studio by two very special guests. Walter Stachel, one of the parents of the circular economy concept, and Amanda Ravenhill, the executive director of the Buckminster Fuller Institute and also the co-founder of Project Drawdown. Please subscribe to any of our channels to get a notification when we go live. And you can catch up on any episodes you've missed on our website, on our YouTube channel. And we're really looking forward to speaking with you next week.